available if anyone cares to see that. And the first item on the agenda is any business pertinent to the township. And if there is anyone who wishes to bring anything before this board, discussions will be limited to 15 minutes per person. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Seeing none. Budget introduction. Tom, would you like to make an introduction?
Well, not much of an introduction needs to be made. We went through all the non-public safety budgets at our previous budget meeting. This one is going to cover public safety, police, EMS, and if we have time, we'll do the other funds tonight. We approached the public safety budget a little differently in that there's a lot of new things. I shouldn't say a lot. There's several new things that in the public safety budgets that came out of the ad hoc committee recommendations. Rick and I met with Dave last week, and we went through and we took a lot of things out of the budget as presented, but left them as a list of add-back items. So as Dave goes through his budget presentation tonight, he's going to talk about those things, talk to the board about them, what they do, why they were recommended by the ad hoc committee or whatever is appropriate, and then basically ask the board if we should add it back in. So that's about it. That's the only introduction I have.
Okay. David, are you going to make the presentation?
Determine whether or not that line item is essential in whether it need to be included or whether it should be omitted or whether we can move it to another year. And as I go through this, you'll see in some cases where the decisions were made to push it to another year. But we considered 2020 expenses, and again, I said the essential part of that. and then considered request upon the Public Safety Ad Hoc Committee report and recommendations that they had too. And those recommendations mentioning tabs are in tab 1 of the Public Safety binder. Essentially, that's the list that we presented when we did the ad hoc report. And it shows everything by police, by fire, by EMS, by public safety, and what the recommendations were. So I'll make reference back to some of those as I go through here. And it lays out the years, because it was a 5-year perspective, and in some cases, 2020 were the year that there was discussions about the implementation, and others they were pushed off to 21, 22, 23, or 24. And so we're really not going to deal with any of the years other than 2020, because that's the year this budget is being prepared for. So when we were done doing that as a command staff, we presented those budgets to the manager and the finance director, and then as Tom said, Rick and he and I sat down and went through that final submission and again massaged some of it. Some of that you'll see here again tonight. So this presentation will detail where the cuts and adjustments occurred to the line items, as well as where recommendations for inclusion of funding for some of the additional items not included in the budget that you see before you tonight and presented to finance are included. And that references back to tab 2, where there's a spreadsheet essentially of the 2020 budget requests not currently included for board action. And during the PowerPoint, there'll be references back to those individual pieces. So let's take first look at 415, public safety. The operating budget's significant changes. Again, the salary for a part-time planner, as the board recalls, last year you approved to hire a part-time planner. That position has been actually an outstanding addition. Justin's been doing a great job. For those who...
So you're not starting with police?
No, I didn't know that that's the way it was presented to you guys.
So
until I got
you're in
it
public
today.
safety, 415.
So we're going to do public safety
I got it.
first.
Thank you for entertaining my question.
Sure.
You got a couple of finance guys here, we're going in numerical order. Makes sense,
I didn't take it out of the order that was given to me. Okay.
When I looked at it when I got the download today, and I'm like, I got my PowerPoint built like in reverse, and it was already printed, so
I can be flexible.
apologize for that.
Not necessary.
So the part-time planner, the only thing there that was included in the budget is an increase, is an adjustment to his hourly rate. There's no more hours included, so he is 20 hours a week currently, but we moved him, hopefully with the board's concurrence, moved him up to $15.24 an hour. He's just doing an outstanding job. He's working right now diligently on the what's called the 8-SEEP process to put together a mall exercise for us for integrated response. He put together largely with staff the Cedar Cliff exercise. So he's going to be working on the EOP over the winter, and he's well deserving. So stop me if you have any questions, but that's basically, you know.
So he was at 296 a week, if I did my math properly, and the $15,000 turned out to be just under 51 weeks. He didn't work a full year.
He did not work a full year.
Now, part of the increase, because I did the percentage, and it looked like it was wasn't the 5 point. The increase also includes an extra week on the job this year. Yeah, the last time was not.
Well, he wasn't hired the
Okay.
first week of January, so it
Got
was
it.
a
And
little.
that makes sense then.
Yeah,
Okay.
he wasn't hired until around March, Commissioner, so.
Got it.
So
Okay.
that's why you would not see the full amount
Yep.
for last year, but he's up and running at this point. He's actually a graduate student working on his master's degree at Millersville, so.
Okay.
It's all intentions to stick with us and continue doing it, so.
Good.
So that's the first ask.
Excuse me, Director.
Yes.
What's the reason again for increasing it?
Just an adjustment. You know, when I look at some of the salaries of some people around here who aren't even doing what not here meaning among staff, but when I take a look at some of the jobs that are being done, even some of the warehousing jobs around here, they're even higher than that. So I just thought it was an adjustment that was necessary for the level of work that professional work that he's doing.
So it's a competitive thing, market.
It is, right.
Okay.
Mr. President, if I may, the purpose of tonight and what we want to try to get is whether we're approving these items or whether we're going to move it into like the next stage of budgeting. 'Cause I mean, in a perfect world, we'd have a little tally up on the thing, and every time we make a decision tonight, you know, in a perfect world, I'd see this is where the budget is. This is, I mean, the way this is presented to us, it's I guess it's calling it a bare bones budget, and then we're adding stuff back. You can see a tally, you know, in a real perfect world, I'd see 5 years out where we're going to stand, you know, with everything as we go, and that tally changing every 5 seconds when we make a decision. So I'm not sure, what's our process, and what do we want to resolve tonight? I'm just curious.
I think we're coming up with the first draft of a public safety budget. Is that what way everybody else sees it?
So we're making notes of our own that if we want to go back after this is all done and say, I don't agree with such and such, that's when we do that.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. That's the way I see it.
Generally, much like we did with the non-public safety, staff has a chance to present these items to you and why they're asking for them. You can make your notes as we go along, and as Commissioner Shin said, we go back and say, you know, well, we don't think we need this, or, you know, we think we can scale that back or something. The idea is then we'll sit down, Rick and I and the other department directors will sit down at another time and start cutting things out if there's a certain number you want to get to. So this is kind of a first exposure to the public safety budget for you.
Okay. So that was the planner. The next is the 415-132. It's salary for public safety officers. In 2018, in 2019 actually, there were 6 PSOs. The budgeted amount in 2018 was $241,080 for the 6. 2019, the budget that you see, or the number is $237,390 for those 6. There was a decrease, and when I first looked at that, and Rick too, were like, oh, so why did it go down if we had 6? Rick advised me that that's because we had one employee, it was a senior employee, who resigned, and when that senior employee resigned, the new PSO was hired at a lower rate. So you actually see a decrease in that line, in those totals. But even though we had a decrease in the line, everybody recalls during the ad hoc recommendation F1.1 and F1.2, basically was, and this is an ad request ask, which was one of the recommendations of the ad hoc, to add a 7th PSO half a year, and that would be $33,390 salary plus benefits. And then the other one was, you recall, was and this is tab 3 of the public safety binder, and that was the salary adjustment to make them more marketable in terms of retention of the PSOs, lining them up with what would be firefighter salaries at the seniority rates from around the central Pennsylvania area. So that was a $25,746 number to do that. And then another part of that recommendation, F1.2, was salary for part-time, and this is a new line that would have to be created, but it's to add essentially about 500 hours at $17.37 an hour, so an additional $9,000 for part-time PSOs to supplement the full-time complement. What's being strived for is the 24/7 PSO coverage because there are, right now with scheduling, we have one that's away deployed, so we have holes in the schedule. So it's an attempt to try to compensate for that, so we have continuous 24/7 coverage. Especially as we talked about before, you know, the last thing you want is a live-in to get out of bed and get out, stand all dressed in bunker gear, and there's nobody to take them to the fire. So this provides for that, you know, hopefully that won't happen with this kind of coverage then. So that's those 2 points. So I'll just keep moving on unless there's questions.
Yep, so the seventh PSO for the half year for 2020 will automatically turn into a if I round up, $67,000 expense for
Roughly.
2021.
When you add benefits, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, double that essentially, right, for 2000, somewhere in there.
Right, for the following year.
About
yeah,
67,000.
Exactly. Going into
2020,
21, right.
21 moving
Doubles.
forward every
Right.
year after that. I got you.
And that's 415 question mark?
The question marks were there was not a line assigned when I did this. So there was not the question marks were not numbers in the budget.
Okay, so we don't see this, where did you come up with that 67,000?
The math just multiplied to
Hate when that
33.
happens. Okay.
I multiplied the 33,390 for the salary and benefits for 1/2 of a year, times 2.
So in 2021, you said it'll be full would be 67.
Well, that's what I asked, and
No,
that's
that- you
correct.
said yes.
We're gonna
Okay.
have a full-time employee
Got it.
for 21 moving forward indefinitely at that point.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. The
Oh, and I'm sorry, I had one more question.
Oh, sorry.
The part-time down here, the $9,000.
right.
2 questions on that. How many part-time employees do we get with?
It's based upon hours, not upon numbers.
Okay, so you might just get as many could.
It's much what we do with EMS now, in that we have a pool of EMTs that are part-time and a pool of ALS providers as well. We have the same thing we do with CSOs. We have a pool of them. We just can't go beyond the hour number.
Right,
So that's how we would handle that same thing.
I got you.
And that's not, we didn't put that in at half a year, because if we can hire them quicker potentially than we would a full-time employee, because we don't have the testing process, the advertising process, basically it's a lot easier to put them on board. So we
Right.
could get the part-time pool running as soon after the first of the year and the budget's in place as we could.
Okay, so then in subsequent years, let's just say we have a budget issue, that 500 hours can be played with easier.
It can be,
than
right,
having a full-time
yeah,
employee.
it's flexible, you know, as long as we're filling the schedule, you know, and once you get, the other thing is, you may have a lot of part-time hours in the beginning of the year, and you'll have less maybe when the full-time person comes on, so that's all flexible based upon scheduling and holes in the budget. It is up there. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, that's all I had.
Okay. Moving on to the next slide, 415-133 is salary for code compliance, and that's just a move. You'll see in your budget about $58,000, and that's to move Bill Yeagley from CD over into, so it's a transfer,
It's not
really.
music here.
Um,
Please. Yeah,
It moves Bill into the public
Yeah, we
safety,
have
which
this
was
in front of us,
previously,
so I
you know,
don't see the number.
discussed through the board.
Thank you.
So it's not an increase, it appears as an increase, but it's not really an increase in our budget because it's a transfer out of Aaron's side of the house to the public safety side of the house. So, 415-149, the stipend. Rick moved this over into the other funds, the LA fire budget, so that's why you're seeing it zeroed out, and it's not
Okay.
there. So it's a fire fund issue, so it'll be discussed on November the 4th, when we get to talk about that. 415-191, the uniform purchase, that's the same. So I wanted to show you the sames, and I want to show you where there might have been a decrease and an increase, just, you know, so it's, we have a balanced perspective. Not everything is an increase. So uniform purchase stayed the same. Uniform maintenance stayed the same as well, 192. And office supplies as well, 215 stayed the same with no increase. Mm-hmm. 220, general expenditures stayed the same with no increase. And gasoline, interestingly enough, was reduced. That line was reduced $2,300, and we think largely it was due to because when the PSOs were largely did some of the CSO things and worked more for the police department, the fact that they're doing fire inspections and sometimes they're taking fire engines, so they're driving those vehicles less. And in that, they're not doing generalized patrol as much as they might have done that previously. So we noticed a decline in the total gasoline use.
Could do even better if you let them use the bikes that aren't used by the bike patrol.
Bikes would be good. I wouldn't want to be pedaling that bike back to the firehouse,
Oh, okay,
though.
okay.
You know, when the alarm came
I
in.
knew there'd be a catch somewhere.
Yeah. Under emergency management, the polo shirts, that line item was reduced from 1,200 down to 400. I'm not quite sure why it got to 1,200 because it's the same amount, it's the same thing we do. So the other thing that was added in, and the board will remember that this has been an ask now ever since I came here, back 3 years ago, to put a smart board up in the EOC. So that's back in the budget. Again, if necessary, it can be pushed into a future year as well. But it was not funded in 18 or 19, but it's again a request. And your budget has 2,500, and I think that's what this should be, not
Yeah.
35. I think I don't know how I got the 3,500 when I did the PowerPoint, but I was looking.
What's the 1,200 you were talking about? Is that under polo shirts?
Yeah, it was.
I have 400 and 400.
Well, that's where it is now. It was originally
Oh.
1,200.
Did make it to this.
It didn't make,
Okay,
and I'm
all
not
right.
sure why. So we moved it back down to the
Okay,
4.
good.
So what you're seeing in your budget is 400, the same as in 2019.
Okay.
Excuse me, the smart board.
Yes.
So last year, I was part of that, not approving it.
Yeah.
We thought, does that help in the future years as well, with administratives? I mean, does it help eliminating the need to have some additional administrative duties
Well,
available?
I think what it helps in is in sometimes the presentations, you've been in the EOC, so you know that there's the 2 screens, they're not smart boards. So basically what you're doing is you're going up there and writing in between the 2 screens. Whereas the smart board in an exercise or even if it's just doing meetings, you can do meetings on it when you're in there too, because that room is used a lot of times as a meeting space as well. So it gives the capability, and Mr. Shin knows what smart boards in school are all about and how they're used, and it gives that interactive technology a better way to do it. We do a lot of meetings in that room aside from just exercise, and I think it enhances that whole.
Even if you just want to stream a video or something, or
Right.
either one that you've done, that you've gone through, and so you can debrief what's the word I want to look for? Look at it and observe it and grade it. How could we
Right.
have done differently? Or if you're bringing something in that's a professional video, it works that way. There's so many things that they're interactive that you can do
Yes.
with them.
And the other thing that I really like to use it for is interactive mapping. So if we would have an incident going on in the township, or even if it's just something where we want to track where people are, or where units are, you bring it up on the screen and you can do it interactive with the map. So it has a lot of functions to it, and so it's back in as a potential
And
ask.
it seems to me it's going to help with our service levels overall, and so.
It's a great training tool.
It is, and it's not something that would just be used by the public safety services either. I mean, actually, if we were having other meetings in there, they just did a 3-day team, 4-day team training, so they could use it as part of team training as well. So it has a lot of different uses that could be used in that environment.
Depending on what you get, the smart boards, they fascinate me every time there's a presidential election, for instance, where they go and they touch that
Right.
state, up comes whatever.
Yeah.
You can get it to do whatever you want to get it to do. It's terrific.
Yeah, it's all based upon the software that you're using, and I'm sure there's a training evolution to it.
I was just going to say, make sure you get, because
Yeah.
I didn't have good training on the one at school, so it wasn't as smart as it could have been.
Yeah. But sometimes those boards are smarter than we are,
That's it.
Commissioner, So anyhow, that's in there as an ask. The other thing that was pulled and is also an ask is $1,200 for the September 2020 full-scale Capital City Mall integrated response exercise. We're planning what we're calling, they all have these little like code names when you do these exercises. So we've kind of framed this as Mall Mayhem. So it'll be the Mall Mayhem exercise, which will be an integrated response active attacker exercise later on a Sunday evening because the mall has to close and clear first. But that'll be September of 2020. I have down there that expenses are shared with South Central Task Force because they will also be committing a lot larger amount of money than $1,200, but that would cover some things that supplemental that the task force is not going to cover. Moving on to 245 operating supplies. $500 was added. Remember last year we bought the floor scrubber for the mall, for the bay floor upstairs. This is an operating supply piece for that. So it's $500 to buy supplies. They've been using that fairly successfully, keeping that floor walk behind scrubbed and clean, and fairly easy to use, but it's been a great asset. The 260 minor equipment. There's a couple of things under here. Scott had come and they're doing a security project for some of the downstairs here, and Scott has some of that. I think you already heard some of it in his budget, but he had talked about, he had asked me if I would include, don't ask me what a NAS drive is, but he had said put an NAS drive in. It's a computer drive, I think, that has something to do with storage. I don't know if Aaron knows or not, but yeah, but anyhow, he said it was $1,500, and he asked me to put it in the budget, so I did. The other piece there was a washer dryer replacement at Station 1 in the bunk area. That's used hard. In fact, the dryer's now out. It failed yesterday, so they have a repair company coming in order to fix it. But it's probably, they are all probably on their last leg because I was told they were brought down here from the old building. From the old firehouse. So the EMS uses it, fire uses it, the live-ins use it as their washer dryer, and public safety. So we put, I think it's $1,000 in there to replace both of them. And then there was an ad request for, this is another thing Scott had asked, for $2,700 for a dual lens, 1536 line resolution camera. Mutual project with CD. It's a security to the rear parking area. There's two of these you'll see. One of them is the fire side, and the other one is the EMS or the police side. And you know, realistically, one could be done this year. We could put the other one into the 2021 if we wanted to take some pressure off of this. But there's currently no surveillance out back. We have the fence, which is great, but we don't have any cameras recording anything that's going on out there. So this would be the first step in doing some of that exterior. It is, I think it's almost identical to the camera that we have on the side of the building that goes down towards the fair trade area. So it's that style dual lens camera. One gets a little closer, one gets wider lens, and they're all HD. Vehicles.
Let me, at the risk of being redundant, and if you already caught this, I apologize, but the items that Dave has in red, the way he set this up, the items in red are not in, your budget. They are things that we're requesting to possibly put in. And NAS drive stands for Network Attached Storage.
That's not in either.
That is in there. The NAS.
is already included in what we're seeing.
Right.
So network attached storage it's an additional drive to
I
store
see it.
video images because they take up a lot of space.
I was in the wrong line. I'm sorry, fellas and lady. Thank you.
Other questions? Moving on to 415-261, vehicles, minor equipment. That line was decreased from 4,000 down to 500. Legal services is the same. There's no increase to that. 415, 312, which is Service Bureau, Guardian Tracking, Planet Scheduler, are all used by the PD, by EMS, and PS. Planet Scheduler is a schedule software. Guardian Tracking is a software that's utilized to manage personnel kinds of issues, everywhere from you did a great job to complaint management, basically. And Power DMS is used for policy development and sign-offs, as well as training for all the disciplines. There's a mutual GIS project that you see there. Again, that's it's $10,000 as a part of Aaron's GIS project that will be the public safety part of that. So it's a comprehensive program that goes to increase GIS. That was part of her presentation, and it's in here for that. There's an ad request, and this is an ad hoc recommendation. This was PS 1.1 to fund a consulting study in the first half of 2020 to review station placement for fire and EMS to consider upgrades and relocation options. Remember from that presentation that if we're going to look at things in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4, 5, I don't know when, but we're going to take a look at what do we do with Arcona in terms of station placement. That's not something we internally within our ranks have the ability to do, because that's a lot of GIS, that's a lot of data that has to be looked at and compared. And we don't want to march down a path where we're making decisions that are considerable financial decisions without the right data. It's all part of the data-driven decision-making piece. So to fund, when I first started looking for firms that could do this, I was quoted as high as in the $30,000, $40,000 range.
So what are they gonna do again, Dave?
It's-
Dumb it down a little for me, please.
Dumb it down is to hire a third-party consultant that will basically take a look at where the calls are currently. Like right now, I can tell you, Tony can tell you that we're running a lot of EMS calls out to Bethany and Health South, and we're EMS is stationed here. But they go out Gettysburg, and every time they go through an intersection in that trip all the way across town, there are, even though the lights are changing, there's still hazards with people going to run the lights.
Yeah.
And you're running a really expensive piece of equipment doing that, and hoping the best that the crew pays attention. Fire department's in the same ballpark. So if we're going to look at putting a station somewhere in the western zone other than Lisburn, maybe we don't even, that's all yet to be determined.
Okay.
But we don't want to, anecdotally say we really think this would be a good thing without the data to support whatever that decision
They'll
is.
come in and look at all that data, okay.
You know, yeah, when I was part of some of the meetings in the ad hoc and listening, this was one of the things that really stuck out to me, that value was there. I mean, I didn't really think it would come in this low.
Yeah.
Because this is clearly an efficiency
Right.
issue that we can't determine for ourselves, and frankly, I think with the issues we're going to have with funding fire services moving forward, I think this is a keystone to that. If I could back up a second.
Sure.
Can you just explain again the GIS? What does that do? I think I remember it, but I don't really remember what the entire GIS project is going to be doing.
So we're trying to make our GIS system more robust, and we have multiple departments that need the information that be provided by GIS. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to bring in consultants to manage all of our GIS, but we were looking at having community development. There's certain things that we need from it, so we would contribute $10,000. There's certain things that Public safety needs from it, so they would contribute $10,000. Stormwater needs certain components from it, so I think the fee has $25,000 in it, budgeted for the project. Did we put it into public works or no? So each entity was kind of doing its contribution to come up with our system, but we really we don't want them having a company and we have a company and then they're not talking together. So this was just an opportunity for all of us to kind of jointly pay for collaborative effort for improved GIS.
Thanks. I actually just don't even know what it is.
Okay. So it's a geographic information system. A lot of people see it as being a map, but it's not a map in the fact that it's stagnant. It's actually a way to input data, and then you can run different scenarios on it. You can map, like one of the things you would probably want to do is you would want to map your infrastructure. So you would have your entire, we'll say, sewer system. This would be not for us. This would be like the sewer authority.
Now I remember.
But
the
it would be
conversation.
underground, and then you could see where the pipes were, and then based on segmentations, you could get attributes of that segment. So it would tell you what that piece was made of, because some of them are in cities are like really old. They're like terracotta pipes, and you would say, well, that probably needs to be replaced first. But some of them are plastic, or so you'd be able to see that, and then you'd be able to see when it was replaced. So it would have a date with it. So it allows you to make better decisions about replacement of infrastructure for public safety. It has a lot to do with response time that they're doing, or they're able to run scenarios like, you know, maybe this isn't as relevant anymore, but 3 Mile Island releases some kind of plume of nuclear.
Little county map too.
Yes, the county mapper too is GIS, and then they could do.
Parcels with a county mapper, where you can go to the county mapper and actually click on a parcel and
Right.
get all the metadata associated with the parcel. That's
Okay.
GIS.
And that's what they do. They just take like a picture and then decide and zero in on it.
Basically, it's pictorial data.
Okay.
Data with, on the back end of the data, or the back end of the picture is data maps, basically.
Look,
The
think of it,
crime
think of it
mapper?
as a map with many layers. You can put, as Aaron said, your sewer system. We can put stormwater inlets. We can put outfalls where stormwater is coming
And
out.
you
You
can
can
click
put
on that.
traffic signals, traffic signs. You can have all that on there and add to different layers.
Okay.
But you have to put it into the map, and then somebody has to go and collect the data,
And that's what
that's
this,
part
that's
of it.
what this expense is gonna be, is that, all that data input and
Yes.
research to get
And
in
managing
there.
it, because
Okay.
you'll find that if you put bad data in, then you can't make very
Sure,
good decisions.
sure. No,
So
I
it's
get it now.
important to have somebody in that field that knows what they're doing, because they can do it much more efficiently than we can.
Just a basic question. Service Bureau, what are we talking about?
Contracts,
That,
essentially professional contracts.
that's a holdover from an earlier time when we outsourced all of our computer operations.
Okay.
It really now it just stands for it still stands for computer stuff, whether it's software or subscriptions or something like that, but it's computer-related software.
I like when you get technical.
Yeah,
Computer
stuff.
I like that.
That's with a capital S.
Yeah, absolutely. STUPH. Thank
Good-
you.
Good to move on. The next one's communications expense. There was 2,400 added there for mobile data charges. They go along with our LTE modems in some of the cars, the public safety vehicles. An additional device was added in 2019. The line also contains, as you see there, 7,866 for the regrouped LA Alert software. That's the software that the manager uses to put messages out to the community, or if there was a disaster, or we needed to do a community warning, we could put it out. It's actually Regroup is the name of the company. We framed it as LA Alerts. Several years ago, we switched from a different vendor that was probably almost 2 times as much as what this is. So this is a really good value for what it's used for and what its capabilities are.
We just had one go out tonight at 6:45. So,
Oh, really?
is on leaf picking. We started leaf picking and where they can find information on that.
But we fund that since it's emergency management based, but yet it has administrative capabilities. We fund it out of the public safety budget, public safety line. That's why you see it here.
And the 7,866, that's somewhat of a recurring every year.
Every
and that
year,
just might
yeah, it's
go
a,
up based
yeah,
on
it's,
their increase
it's a
in the-
service fee, and it hasn't gone up for the last 2 years or so. I think if you take a look at your budget, you probably see last year was the same amount.
The $2,400 for the mobile data charge, that's not
Right.
$2,400, that's not for one device, right?
I think it's total
That's five.
for them.
5
Okay,
devices.
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, it's 5 separate
I
devices.
got it, I just saw an additional device added, and I just thought.
Yeah, it just increased the line, so I put
Oh.
what the line increase was.
So thank you, Dean, for raising that. The 960 and 19 is just less devices? Is that what we're talking about? That's why we're still $40 a month, but it's
Right.
mobile data charges. In 2019, it's $960 and moved it to 2,400 because there are more devices?
There are more devices.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Uh, 370, maintenance and repairs to equipment. That line decreased, and it was because we saw that there was like I said, annual percentage of PD copier, and we took a look at it, and you can look back, hardly anything was charged to that line. So I think Rick found out that it was a device that we no longer have. It was pulled out, but yet it was still in the budget, so we just took the $800 out. It's a kind of a cleanup piece.
Nice pickup, Rick.
378 radio maintenance was the same. There's no increases to that. And 420 dues, subscriptions, and memberships. $500 was added for Bill Yeagley's codes publications since he switched over. It's with his move from to public safety from CD. And then all other items in the line remained the same in 2019 and will be in 2020. Under the 421 training line, that was increased due to adding $3,000 tuition reimbursement for an anticipated employee who has requested to attend undergraduate and/or graduate classes. It's also increased for various accreditation and International Code Council and PennBach conferences. That also is Bill Yeagley's area. Public relations, there was an ask there. Requested $4,000, which you don't see in your budget. New for recruitment, retention, and assistance. Volunteer recruitment, that was goal F1 of the ad hoc. And retention banners, tables, sheets. It was 1,500 in 2019, but even the 1,500 didn't carry over. So we're looking at increasing it to, instead of just 1,500 to 4,000 to support the volunteer recruitment and retention piece.
And that's not in yet.
No, that's not. That's a new request.
Hey, can you explain why that's not also, I'm sure there's a logical reason, why it's not also under the fire budget itself?
Because we do a lot of the public, Rick, I don't know if that would end up getting transferred over as a part of your funds transfer or not.
Yeah, a lot of if you look at the interfund transfers, there's a transfer every year from the fire fund to the general fund, and it picks up all these costs. So it's, I wouldn't say it's academic in which fund you put it in, but PSO salaries, for example, go in here. A large chunk of that goes actually paid by the fire fund because they do fire services. You have the same thing with a lot of the computer services, and you have it, here as well. So these would all eventually get swept over into the fire fund.
So why is there a need to have it in our budget then here? If the fire fund is, if it's whether it's reimbursing money, if it's reimbursing an increase that we add this in, then it's gonna be an additional cost to the fire
It could indeed be in the fire fund. The fire fund's under a lot of financial pressure.
No,
but,
I realize that, and we're gonna get to that another night. I was just curious to know why, that's all.
I mean, it could, yes, it could logically be there, sure.
It,
I think the other, Dean, I think the other piece to this is that even though we're pulling that from the fire fund, it's activities that are being performed by Captain Worth and the PSOs.
Oh,
So the same as they're performing their work, that's why their salaries appear, you know, here in the public safety, even though we're backfilling that out of the fire fund in terms of, it's kind of like charging off to an account. You know, it's like who's doing the work, that's where it's getting charged to. So it ends up getting charged to the fire fund, even though the work is being done on this side of the house. I don't know if that helps or not.
I think so.
That's the way, in my mind, that's the way it made sense to me when I tried to figure it out. I struggled with this 3 years ago too.
I think I understand that, but
The next one down is another ad request at just $1,700 to support materials for public safety awareness and education. That's not in there currently, and it actually has never been in the budget. But it just allows us to do some of that PR work aside from the volunteer side that talks about what public safety is, what public safety does. You know, it's brochures, it's publications, it's handouts, it's all of those things that go with that marketing plan to try to attract people to become more involved in the public safety side. And then finally, for public safety, 730 is the capital budget items. And the only thing that you'll find in there is the usual annual $10,000 that we put in because we've been for years now doing, adding preemption devices to traffic lights around the township. Remember I brought to your attention the most recent one down at Carlisle and Commercial. So that one's in place now, but we have a whole list where we've gone around and we've prioritized which intersections do not have them, and which ones would be on the pecking order for which year. So I don't remember which ones for 2020, I'd have to go back and look at the list, but we used to do 2 a year, and with budget constraints, we backed that down to 1 a year. So you used to see 20,000 in here, but now it's 10,000. So we'll continue that process until we have all of the intersections by priority upgraded to preemption devices.
Director, what is PS1?
Public,
public safety vehicle number 1.
Okay.
yeah, what am I looking?
It's been replaced for 40,000? It was replaced?
Yeah, that was this year.
Okay.
Is that last, is that
Yes,
from
I'm sorry, it
2019?
is. That's why I'm looking,
Yeah, I'm
I'm
looking
seeing
at
a
the
40.
PowerPoint, I'm going like.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at the budget
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, so that PS1 was Public Safety 1, it was a Ford Explorer, that was replaced,
And so
Dave,
that's
Dave
what-
or Dan, what percentage through all the intersections are we with preemptive devices?
yeah, maybe a little.
29 intersections? So you're saying we got 14 or 15 done?
I can, yeah, I
Okay.
can actually, I'd be happy to share that document, it's not anything that, you know, you certainly can see it.
It's
I
not
can send
critical
it-
that it's exact, and I'm
Yeah, I
just
can send it to
interested.
the manager, and you can see how we track that. I can do that tomorrow, and then he can share it with a board if you'd like to see where we are. Because it basically is a spreadsheet that shows which ones are next by priority. Because what we did when we did that like 3 years ago, I sent the police out with a list of the intersections, and I said, okay, in terms of if you're going emergency from here to there, which ones are the most critical for you to get through unobstructed? And they rated and ranked them. EMS rated and ranked them. Fire rated and ranked them, and we came up with this basically list, a ranking list. And that's what we're working off of each year when we do an upgrade to a traffic signal.
And about how many years out till we get to where we want to be?
Until we're finished with it,
Yeah.
I think it's another 8 years.
8 more.
And then I think at that point, we may be going back and starting at the beginning again. Yeah. doing upgrades to the ones we've already done. So it's been an annual process. One of those things where I'm not sure will ever be done.
Planned obsolescence, right?
Well, yeah, they'll come out with some new whiz bang that,
Well, they might have something eventually where all the electric cars later on just shut off.
exactly. That'd be great for the next traffic light out front here.
Well, if we go
People
with the
running through it
green,
all
the
time.
green plan will be horse and buggy, and we'll be
Yeah,
employing people to
we'll be
clean
on
up after
bikes.
them.
So that actually ends 4:15. Any other questions about 4:15? And then we'll move on, not to screw you up more, but now we're gonna go to EMS. We're going back, significant changes, staffing, people increases in this budget for 2020. Some of those operational suggestions were pushed out into future years, so you won't see that. And when you see 412 question mark salary, that's because when I looked at the budget, the question marks did not have numbers in. What you saw in 2019 is, what you see in yours is $63,360. That was for half year of ALS salary.
Oh.
Because we were paying for Life Team out of a different line, which we'll talk about when we get to it. So in 2020, we're actually looking at $2,009,600 for the 4 paramedics for full year. For the full year with 4 paramedics from Life Team, their contract was $296,071. And that was before any negotiation of terms for a 2020 contract, because we terminated that contract back in July of 19. So costs likely for the personnel side of that contract, and they roped in some of the other costs with that contract as well. They roped in some of the medication costs and some of those other things, but that's where we are at this point
Well,
with
I
that.
mean, if you want to compare apples to apples, you have to take this full-time line item plus the ALS part-time plus the ALS overtime. So it's not really a comparison of their contract to $209,000. In this budget, there's considerably more expenditure than that for ALS personnel. Although
Other
when,
things are just, you mean, other than just salary, is that what you're talking about?
well, if the salary, what we used to pay them as far as their contract
Yeah,
is broken down when we have our own folks into several different line items. So you have the full-time personnel, you have the part-time personnel, you have the overtime
Yes.
for the ALS personnel, although Pinnacle Life Team did charge us for overtime. So
Right.
that was on top of the contract. So we would have to really draw a comparison to apples and apples, we'd have to go back and look at what we actually paid them, not only in the contract, but the contract overages, and then compare it to what we're going to be paying our folks. But I just didn't want the board to think that all we're paying ALS is $209,000. It's a little
no,
more than that.
we have our own now, though.
Yes, we have our
Yes,
own.
and this is the first year where we're full-time into this,
Correct.
right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Right,
some
but
of
we
those-
only have 2, right?
No,
We
Two.
only-
E-
We have 4.
paramedics?
Yes.
No,
4
4.
Oh, we
paramedics
have the
now.
4.
Yeah,
Okay.
the board approved the 4th
That-
in place of the EMT at a recent meeting.
Okay, but I mean, okay, gotcha, but moving,
No, not yet.
right. So and that was gonna be my question anyway, because I know that we've been coming in a little bit different than what we originally anticipated on the conversion, originally. So I think it would be helpful, if it's not too much trouble, maybe to give us an apples-to-apple comparison, not tonight, but before we sit down and, talk about this again.
Apples to apples, what do you mean?
Well,
The-
for adding in what the manager's saying, the real comparison would be,
The part-time people and so forth.
or whatever the real comparison would be, so we can see it, because I agree there's value there, I think we should see what that difference is.
Well, we're in it, right? I mean,
Yes, I think
mean-
what Commissioner Vallone's asking for is our actual real payments to Pinnacle or Life Team last year, because there's the contract amount and then there's the overtime. So if we add those two together, it gives us a real cost of outsourcing our ALS last year versus what we're planning on paying this year with our own personnel. That's what you're
In
asking.
2020.
In 2020.
But just from an academic standpoint, because we're in it. It's not like, if we wanted to wonder whether it was a good thing to do or not, it would be good to have that done prior to pulling the switch.
Correct. I think it's a good argument on whether we're heading in the right path
Yeah.
or not, sure.
There's $71,500 ALS overtime. Why so much overtime? Overtime used to be something that happened because
Some
you
of-
didn't plan right, somebody got sick
Right.
or whatever.
Some of that actually is because in the 12-hour shift model, which is what we went to 2 years ago, they work 36 hours one week, and they actually work 48 hours the next week. Fair Labor Standards Act, to get their 80 hours, plus, actually they work 88 hours. And under the Fair Labor Standards Act, that 8 hours beyond the 40 has to be at an overtime rate. It's not like, the Fair Labor Standards Act exempts firefighters from that and police officers. But they never exempted EMS people. So we're kind of locked into the Fair Labor Standards Act in doing that. So
Can't we just adjust their schedules? I mean,
becomes a little more difficult to do that because of the 24/7 environment. I mean,
well, I'm a civilian, so I'm not really questioning directly, but how difficult is it? Is it $71,500 difficult?
well, it's,
Can we give it a second look?
some of that 8 hours is that, plus some of that is just extra calls when they're
Okay.
here and they're late, and so you'd have to do an overtime analysis to see.
You can't be in the middle of decompressing someone and go, oh, my shift is up. I hope you make it. I get
Right.
it. Okay, I'm with
Yeah,
you. All
so-
right.
But, again, we're not trying to like block out that happens, because you go down to the bottom in 141 where it talks about labor part-time, we actually talk about the EMTs and paramedics in 2019 for the salary for the part-timers. And that's, again, for 19 it was 65,850, and for 20 it was 70,000, or we anticipate it'll be around
Bless you.
70,850 for a full year. So it didn't double, because adding that fourth full-time medic will compensate for some of that part-time time. So back up to the middle piece on the PowerPoint. Again, this is not a line that you see, but it's an ad request for $4,000 since two of the paramedics actually are going to be tasked with doing some ALS supervisory responsibilities. There's a piece in tab 4 in the public safety binder that talks about that, based upon task duty. It would not be a promotion, it would be an assignment to those duties, but it's like quality assurance duties, actually reviewing trip sheets, making sure that the protocols are being followed and those kind of things. But that's what, right now, we're not gonna make any changes to that at this point. So this is ALS supervision to start with. And we'll see, we'll see where we go downrange. But ALS supervisors, when Tony's gone, there's nobody here to supervise the medics. So this also serves that functional piece
Well,
as well.
that's a good question, the current supervisor. They're just not at the point where they have the credentials to
Well,
supervise.
that's, I think,
can supervise paramedics.
no, they can't. Not under the law, they can't. Not under the, that,
I disagree with you.
well, we can write a letter to the Department of Health and get a reading on
I
that.
think you gotta do that because if you go to Fairview, they'll tell you they can because they have their EMT supervising paramedics.
Yeah,
Jared has.
Jeremy Moggins, I've talked to Jeremy. Jeremy's an administrative person. Those medics are supervised by their their physician. So, who's looking at all of their charts. So, that's not my understanding what the law is. But we'll take a look at that. But anyhow.
I'm not saying an EMTP, but I mean.
Yeah. It's based upon levels of certification. And, you know, the EMTA is actually underneath the paramedic.
I understand that.
So they really, from a medical perspective, they can't, now even an EMT can release a medic, as you know, you give your number. But that's not, right, but that's not a supervision piece. That's a release of that medic saying, I don't need you. But the medic can also choose not to take that number and still respond in, you know, as you know. So anyhow.
Well, you both lost me, so.
So does the dollar an hour, which you're adding in the $4,000?
Right.
All right, okay. So the dollar an hour is split between, we want to say 2 paramedics. Are they going to, is the dollar an hour so they get self-training, or is it just an additional bit so that they would be
It's a-
compensated for that additional
It's a
duty?
compensation for a task assignment.
I got you. Okay. Thank you.
We had gone over 141, which is salary labor, part-time. Overtime, full-time. There was, one of the things that makes this so high is there was no overtime budgeted in 2019. So what you see there is 148.70 for both ALS and BLS combined. And that also includes the 8 hours paid for the FLSA we talked about, over 40 hours, and the OT mandate under the federal law. 112, 149 overtime part-time, increased 2,000, because if they work more than their 40 hours, they're also entitled to that, you know. And a lot of times, you know, when especially this year, because this year we had 2 people that were off the clock basically due to injury. We were using a lot of part-timers and actually a lot of full-timers to work shifts as well, so we could maintain our 24/7. The hope is by restructuring schedule and people that we won't have that problem downrange. But there were times where some of our EMTs were working a lot of hours, unfortunately, because we didn't have the people to backfill it. So that's 149. When we get down to 191, uniform purchase, uniform maintenance, and office supplies, they're all the same. No increases to those lines, and forms 212. General expenditures was an increase of 1,000 to the line. There was 0 budgeted in 2019. And year-to-date, there's been $838 posted to that line for expenditures that didn't feed into any other category. So I put $1,000 in there just to, you know, so we don't keep doing that.
Dave, I have a question, I think, for Rick, even though it's your budget.
Sure.
Rick, on 412-197, Township pension transfer. Was that an actuarial decision? The actuary decides what would go into there?
It is a combination of a formula provided by the actuary compared to our actual payroll dollars. So I think the answer is
But
yes,
yes,
I would say,
okay.
yeah.
All right,
The,
thank you.
This was we have to adopt the pension budget by the end of September. So back at probably your, I don't know if your first or second September meeting, you guys adopted the pension budget.
I remember.
Along with the MMO, the
Yeah.
obligation.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
226 cleaning supplies, removed and listed as 0. There was no expenses posted to the line in 2019, so we think that Bob's probably, you know, however that is, it's being pulled from someplace else. And the other thing was that EMS essentially decided that they were going to clean their own house last year. So they've been doing that internally. So there was no cleaning supplies, and if we bought some, we might have bought them. Maybe that's where the general expenditures came in. We'd have to go back and track those, but there was nothing in the line when we looked at it, so we zeroed it. 231 gasoline, 274 rather, and 374, and the squad are gasoline engines. The new vehicle 274 is a diesel. So there was some modifications made to that. We reduced the gasoline item from 11,000 to 16. It balances out because we added $5,000 to diesel. So we didn't increase it because we now have a diesel. We just moved money around between those two areas.
You like the diesel better?
They do. Yeah.
Compared with gas.
Yeah, it has more power, and there's a lot of reasons. Medical supplies is 243. Other than ALS medications, it doesn't include that, but it was an increase in the line from 9,000, and this one went up dramatically to 45. Again, primarily due to ALS supplies. It was seriously underfunded. We programmed that in based upon a consultant's projection in 2019, and that was off. The other thing that happened is the vendor who we buy these supplies from changed, and the new vendor's prices went up 30%. It doesn't just affect us, it affects everybody else who uses that vendor, and they pretty much have a corner of the market, unfortunately. The line items based on 2019 cost to date, and they're projected for 2020. CPR supplies, we decreased that line 3,000 due to changes in the CPR program administration. It was $9,500 in 2019, so it'll be $6,500 is what's in your budget for 2020. For ALS medications, after startup now, we're not projecting any increase for 2020. So 246 will be the same with no increase. Minor equipment increased due to ALS equipment needed that was not purchased at the startup. There's also two asks in there. One is for an adult ventilator for $4,900, and the other one is for is a combination project. You'll see this when we see fire in 2 weeks. You'll see this as well. If any of you have ever been in the fire day room, well, it's not just fire anymore. It's used by EMS. It's used by the live-ins. It's used by firefighters. But that bunk room, that live-in, basically lounge, that furniture is pretty shot. So this is $3,500 being shared 3 ways, each putting in $3,500 to put a tiered seating arrangement in there, which is, it's also, if you take a look at it, feel free to stop up and look at it, but it's all cloth, and it has a tendency to get pretty filthy pretty quickly as cloth furniture. This would be vinyl, so it'd be easier to wipe down and clean and keep sanitary. So those are the two asks that would be there. Again, you see the note. It says the ventilator would not be purchased if the community paramedicine grant was awarded. Remember when we presented that grant for the community paramedicine, which would add about $130,000 worth of equipment, including additional monitor, additional CPR device, all of those things. So there's some things that are built into the budget that were pulled out that, you know, if the board is inclined for us to go for the community paramedicine grant award, we would use these as match pieces and not purchase the items. The medical director increase, $2,500 for a full year, went from $7,500, which was a little over a year, was the spring to the end of the year, goes up to $10,000 for the medical director. Under 318, other professional, was decreased. This is where the life team contract came from, again, as a professional contract. So that line was decreased. It was for half of a year in 2019. It was $148,035 for that half year, January to June contract. So that's why that line's down. But we had to add $4,500 for ESO patient care reporting software. That's the software that EMTs and medics use to do trip sheets, patient care reports. It was previously fully funded by the Emergency Health Services Council in a grant. That grant ended halfway through the year last year, and we paid for our portion of that grant out of existing budget, but next year we're looking at about $4,500, and that's based upon call volume. That's how they deduct that or they add that up. We added, again, 2,700 for code stat. It's a quality assurance review of cardiac arrest to talk about how well that patient was cared for. It's actually a liability protection piece too, because you know, we've had cases where families have not been very happy that their loved one didn't make it, and they look for all kinds of reasons why that might be. So this is a protection piece, again, for the crews that says they did everything they could have done, and there was nothing else that they could have done in order to sustain that patient. So that's what code stat is.
Dave,
Yes.
can you jump back up to 312 for just a second?
Sure.
Service Bureau, the medical director increase of $2,500 from 7,500 to 10,000. Is that because of calendar, not because he asked for an increase
No, he
already?
didn't ask for an increase at all.
Okay.
The way that contract is structured, Commissioner, is it's based upon a call, how many calls he evaluates and sees. So, you know, it's just knowing that we only budgeted for about 3/4 of a year last year. And what you see in your budget line, and I don't have it in front of me, is where we were about a month ago, I guess, for 19. So we just projected that we'll probably be around, it probably won't be 10,000, it'll probably be shy, but that'll cover us for the medical director's
Okay.
professional fees.
I just want to comment on, back up just one more step, the day room seating, that's an add-in item, it's over $500. Again, I mean, I see tremendous value in these sort of things, especially when we're talking about, you know, trying to get more live-ins, essentially going to be firefighters and volunteers, and maybe across the other disciplines as well. You know, to have a desire to be here as well as, you know, responsibility to do and make a commitment. And I think these types of things are important. And I hope that fellow commissioners will see that in those items as well.
Well, I would welcome anybody to take a walk up to the day room and see how much you'd want to sit next to somebody on one of those couches, depending upon, you know, coming back from a fire call or something else, you know, it's.
So
there-
this is, I'm sorry, I was answering another call.
Sure.
This is where our folks are gonna be when they're not out
This is
fighting
their
fires.
living room,
Got it.
basically.
Okay.
So there's a TV in there, and we looked at various options. We know that one of the things that's popular in a lot of firehouses are basically theater kinds of seatings. That's really expensive. We found a product that is basically tiered, but the first level is a little lower, the next level sits a little higher, and the rear level sits a little higher. You still put your feet on the ground. So it's tiered seating on one level. But it comes in, if you do all 3 rows, which would fit in there, about $3,500 times 3. So we just put, since EMS shares that space, and fire shares that space, and public safety shares that space, we just kind of spread it out among the different areas of the budget. So you'll see it repeated in other areas. Any other questions, or are we good to move on? 321, communication expenses. We added $960 for the Life Pack monitors. That's the LTE, the cellular cost for modem communication of the EKG to the hospital. We added $2,500 for the iPad monthly, because they now have iPads they can do their PCRs, their trip sheets on remotely while they're still at the hospital. They can also use them to get patient signatures electronically, whereas before they used to have paper. So we're moving as much as we can towards electronic reporting and retention and everything that goes through electronically. 340 is advertising and printing. That was an increase of $600 for anticipated increase in costs in that area. And then 370, which is maintenance and repair of office equipment. That's the same with no increase. Maintenance and repair of equipment. I think that's a double, isn't it? Well, one's 370, one's 374. Oh,
375.
that was an error on my part then. That was 4,253 for the life pack. Remember, we purchased under capital this year 2 life packs and a Lucas device. Lucas device is an automatic CPR device that when patients in cardiac arrest, you put that device on them and it does the CPR, freeing up the providers to do other skills. That equipment was new in 2019 and now has a maintenance contract that goes with it for $4,253. Under 375, maintenance and repair of vehicle, it was the same with no increase. And 378, radio repair and maintenance was the same with no increase. There was there, and I think it's been moved, but I had noted that the American Academy of Pediatrics was $1,000, which was to be moved to 420. That dues and subscriptions. It was here at one point under this one. I think Rick moved it. Dues and subscriptions, memberships, 420. We added $150 for the American Trauma Society of Pennsylvania, $375 for the National Association of Emergency Medical Physicians, and $50 for the National Academy of EMTs. Under 421 training, 2 employees had requested to take courses, so there's $6,000 at $3,000 apiece in there for tuition reimbursement. And then we put $1,400 in there for advanced EMT training certification for employee development for those employees that might be interested in taking that training. Under the ad hoc request, you could recall, we talked about the community paramedicine program and the grant. If the board's inclined to go in that direction, we were going to pay for the fee for that out of this year's budget to file it. But if we are successful and we're awarded that, it would be awarded in 2020, and we'd have about a $13,000 match. So these items, the advanced life support mannequin, the advanced life support mannequin adult and peds, and the advanced life support mannequin, that was actually something else. It's not, I duplicated that. But anyhow, that 4,400, the 1,800, and the 1,000 would be used as match along with the ventilator that you saw earlier. And that's tab 5 of the public safety budget binder.
But Dave, the 1,400, is that the NAEMT training center? Above tuition reimbursement?
That's the 1,400 is advanced EMT training certification.
It's down several.
I got it,
it's
I'm
spaced
sorry.
kind of
Thank
far
you.
down, yeah.
Yeah, we have one currently
That's
trained
fine,
to that level.
that's fine. I just couldn't find the
And
number.
it would be actually certifying any other interested EMT that want to go there. We would assist them with that training.
Well, how do they make their, I mean, $6,000, God bless them, I'm glad you're willing to take classes, but how do you evaluate when you're gonna invest $6,000 on 2 employees?
Yeah,
I get that,
it's
but
just it's.
Anybody says, you know, that looks good to me, I'd like to do that, and how do you
We don't,
decide?
I don't think we have anything that says it has to be in your area of field. I mean, we have, the police have been using it for a while. It's actually,
Yeah.
but it's in the contract.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the personnel manual says the same thing.
We have two employees stating they want to go get some further education,
Right.
and we reimburse up to $3,000.
Right. And for EMS, it could include going to nursing school, or a whole variety of other things, because you get out of nursing school and you can come back as a healthcare professional and actually work in advanced life support field. Now, one of the things that we require is if you take that money, you have to give us 2 years after receiving that money, or else you owe it back.
Yep.
Okay. So it's not just, free money handed out. There is that parameter that goes with it. And you have to actually submit a request that goes down and is signed off by the manager. And then you have to provide proof that you completed those courses and got grades, good grades. So you're not
You have to,
flunking out and getting the money.
have to pass the course?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you can't just go and goof off and flunk out and say, okay, pay me, here's my tuition bill.
When the application comes down, if it's an EMT wanting to take a music class, I would probably not approve it.
And,
Music's important.
And they lay it out and we reimburse them, is that how? Because that's the way it was at district.
Yeah, they, so we authorize them to take the class. And then
Yes.
they have to successfully complete the class, submit their bill and their
Okay,
grades
that's
to
what I'm
us.
saying. They need
Yes.
to pay it, and then we reimburse them upon successful, got it. Okay.
And is that our policy for every, other than the police, let's say, under a different contract, is that the policy for all of our employees,
Yes.
up to that same
So-
amount?
Yeah, we have the police contract, which covers police, and then we have the personnel manual that covers everybody else.
Right. and
Okay, so
any-
so I'm sorry, Dean. So they wanted to take I misunderstood. They wanted to take a class that was $5,000. They're picking up 2 out of the 5.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
And
we're only, it's under the township policy, they're only reimbursing $3,000
Yeah.
per year.
Yeah,
So if they're enrolled someplace where it's $12,000 a year, they're only getting $3,000 out of
Yeah.
township.
And a public works employee, let's say, could just take a class of CNC, sort of mechanics or something, right? And we would reimburse up to 3,000 of that if they chose to do it.
Yes.
Is it pretty liberal policy that we allow, when they come forward, our employees in general?
Yeah, there's no pre-qualification other than it has to be in your field, but it's open to anybody.
Right.
Anybody that wants to, better themselves. We have always taken the approach, and the board has as well, that educated employees are better. Yeah, so the more education they can get for themselves, the better employees they're going to be, the better decision-making they're going to display. So, yeah, we encourage education and training.
And are we usually funded well in that, in each year's budget?
Generally, we budget high, because
Okay.
there's people that say they tell us that they're interested, but then for whatever reason, they don't get around to it, or they change their mind or something like that. So we don't often spend everything we budget on the tuition reimbursement. Now,
But we-
training is a different matter. The 421 budget, we normally spend training, because these are things that people attend because of their professional affiliations or things that they need for certifications. But just let's say the college or postgraduate degrees, we don't usually spend everything we budget.
but Tom, the tuition reimbursement is under 421, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we wouldn't say to someone, oh, sorry, we weren't anticipating that, so we didn't budget for it, so you can't take the course.
Oh, I might.
Okay.
I might say,
Alright.
well, you should have told us last year when we
Okay.
asked.
Yeah, we asked them to, we
We-
asked them
we
to
ask 'em.
give us
But you
advance.
get an idea.
Yeah, in fact, I think, Leon, you even put that out, didn't you, before we did ours?
I do put it out, before the budget season, I put out a survey of training participation for the school and officers, to get an idea, and we budget accordingly.
Mhm.
But I think we had school and officers in situations that didn't say they wanted to take the class, and decided that they did want to take the class, we could,
Yeah. Well, I probably drove the district crazy, because when I was working on my master's, I never told them ahead of time. I put in for it and did it. They had to approve it, and they always did.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, one of the officers is working on his master's through SHIP, and they have a tuition deferment program, where if you have an employer that's going to actually reimburse you, you sign an agreement, and they actually don't bill that employee until they're done with the class and they've successfully passed it, and then you get the tuition back and you get reimbursed, so you don't have any outlay.
That's
money.
nice.
Yeah, I don't see too many schools that do that, but I know SHIP is one of them that will, so. And it's just for tuition, it's not for certifications though, I understand.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, then moving on. That takes us up to 730 capital, and there's another ambulance, 174's end of life, and 174, which is the last remaining Horton, we're looking at putting that on an F-150 chassis, and essentially identical, as close to identical as the 274, which is the one we just bought.
Is that-
So that be replaced in 2019.
Is Is that a Ford, does that say 150 chassis? You mean, it should be
Oh,
350.
550, yeah, sorry.
550 chassis.
The 550,
This is the ambulance to replace I-174, or?
correct,
And it's 260,000.
yeah.
Always have to pay if you had to buy all the guts and everything.
Okay, police, moving into police. There's something, and this is tab 6 of the public safety binder. The board will remember, a couple of years ago when we went from, having 3 platoons to 4 platoons, we had to add an additional corporal. At the time, there was not, we had a lieutenant, actually, who was promoted to captain. That was at that point, right? Yeah, so we had a vacancy for a lieutenant, but we didn't have enough money to fund the additional corporal. So we made the decision to create a sergeant's position and then actually keep the lieutenant, which is Lieutenant Thomas, in his position, and then eventually we thought at that point, well, let's see how this goes, and then we'll transition later on. What ended up happening was, not going, no. What ended up happening was that the sergeant's position was operational, but it took on more and more duties, administrative duties. So we actually thought that we should probably go back to the 2 lieutenant model, which this department had for a number of years. To do that, we could do that now because Lieutenant Thomas has his drop. Partway through next year, he reaches his drop period and he has to leave, so that creates a vacancy as a lieutenant. So it would be the perfect time to transition back to the 2 lieutenant model. And as we costed it out, essentially all it does is raise, with a half year of the sergeant and a half year of 2 lieutenants, it only increases the line item for the lieutenants by $2,424 difference at the end of the transition. So that's what this ask is, essentially is to grant us to make that move back to a 2 lieutenant administrative model again, and then eliminate the sergeant's position.
Dave, pardon me, did you say 2,000? You meant 200,000,
No.
Now,
No, the difference, I think,
the difference at the end of the year of the
Oh,
transition
at the end of the year, all right,
Yeah.
sorry.
is only 2,424.
Right.
When you take the fact that the sergeant, we would only be paying the sergeant half of their salary for 2020, and then the lieutenant would be leaving, you get a promotion for 2 new lieutenants, basically.
So once we're selling for a full year, what is this be,
About $2,500 for a full year.
So a full year, 2021, let's say, which we're selling, and we're going to say we achieve,
Yeah.
20, which we probably won't, right? Even if
it's,
Thomas won't be leaving in 20. So let's
The boss.
say hypothetically in 2022,
Right.
one full year, talk about double. Okay.
Right.
well, it's roughly 5% increase from one step to another. So a sergeant with the same longevity as they would be moving up from one, it's a 5% increase, basically. If they're within the same step, so let's say they're step 5, they're going to go from an S5 to an L5, which is only a 5% increase, so roughly 5%.
We're looking at net impact of about $5,000 plus
Right.
net worth.
That's his, nothing for you. You're here.
Dave, I know he's sitting in the audience, I could just ask him, but I'm not going to. Are the officers, are the lieutenant and the captain still part of the CBA?
They are.
The captain is
No, the
not.
captain's
Captain is
not.
not.
Captain's, it's not, but the lieutenants and the sergeants
Does he have
are.
a separate contract?
It's a separate agreement.
He,
MOU, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
that's working. Talk loud.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
is it, Capper?
Well, green, fixing it all,
It's not green anymore?
it's green now.
Oh. Go ahead,
You want to
talk.
sit up here, and then you can just come up here and use the.
Yeah, yeah.
Ready
it's-
for a
we're
blood
picking it up.
test.
Say something.
How about now?
Yep.
Can you
Word.
hear me
Yeah.
now?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's what that is all about, all of those numbers under 124.
Well, I had a
125.
question, I had a question about 123, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I tried to look at the numbers from 18 to 19, and there was an if I did it correctly, several times, it looked like 8% increase. Is that right? So in other words, it was 106.5, almost 106.6 to 115.5. Looks like 8%. I'm looking at the actual numbers, not
Yeah,
your.
that's probably a Rick question.
You say a rigged question?
Yeah.
Rick question.
Oh, a
Rick.
Rick, I thought this was a rigged
No,
question. Okay.
What's the question?
The question is, we go from 2018 for 410, 123, 106, almost 106.6, to
Mhm.
then 2019, it was budgeted at 115, 460. That's an 8% increase unless I made my math wrong. And I'm wondering why that was so high.
Well, it's always, Rick can maybe flesh this out, it's always difficult comparing actual to budget, because budget's just a projection.
Well, I was looking at budget to budget. We budgeted 106,
No,
573.
that was actual.
That's actual.
Yeah, that's actual. That 106,573 was actual
It's
expense. in
actual for
2018.
2018.
Correct.
And then the 2019
The-
is the 115,
That's
460 is budget.
That's
is what you're
budgeted
saying.
for 2019.
Okay.
And some
We don't-
things like just the number of workdays changes every year, just something like that could throw it off.
Well, you know, that's quite a change. All right, so what if I really wanted to, I could try to figure out by doing some straight line projections whether this, as of the end of September, was gonna actually turn out to be 115, 460, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't do
Yeah,
that.
if you multiply it by 1.333, it probably
I didn't do
come
that.
out pretty close.
I didn't do that, okay. And how did you determine, anybody up front here, how did you determine the increases to the various individuals? Like 3.8 and then the other two are 4 and then 4.6, is that some type of merit?
I have a spreadsheet that does this. There's a lot of components in this due to the contract.
I was gonna say it's part of the
So-
CBA.
Some have steps, some have longevity.
All right, okay. So that's a yes answer. Okay. Thanks. I'm good for a little bit here. Thank you.
The next one on the list is 410-132. That's the salary for patrolman. Again, this is ad hoc recommendation P1.1, but it was just reiterated by the ad hoc, but it was actually, the board can recall, part of the discussion for the staffing study presentation that Captain Crone did back in October of 2018. The ad request, which is not in the numbers that you see, is to add another patrol officer in 2020, July the 1st or after, at $42,300 for half-year salary for that year, which would be included on that would be about $62,150 if the benefits were included.
So that's half a year salary and benefits is the 62,150.
This is $62,150, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, the benefit piece would have to be spread out through the benefit lines. That was not included, but this is just a whole number associated with that.
Dave, what's a senior officer? We have 15 full-time senior officers. It goes to 16
It's a
full-time
contract
senior officer.
That is, if there's not a corporal on duty, it's a premium pay that the supervising officer would get. That's not an individual, that's just, I think it's like 40 cents an hour or something like that for supervising.
It's a differential for being the supervisor on
Yeah.
the shift.
What is, am I reading this number right? 1,000,002? And I'm not gonna lie to you folks, sometimes the numbers are not in the right slots.
You mean for the,
Yeah, it's 410,132 under salary patrolman, and it, under the 2019 budget, it says 15 full-time senior officer.
1.2,
And then for 2020, it's 16 full-time senior officer. And there's a, I don't know whether this 1,000,004 is a carry down, or, I don't,
It's, in the,
yes, it is.
the detail, in the detail, it'll often be offset a line. The one above that and to the right that's in bold, that's a total. So if,
Yeah.
you could list several things under the detail column that would all total to that. This just happens to be only one item in this.
So is it fair to say then, Tom, that if I carry across the full-time, the senior officer past the 1,000,004 to a 0, does that mean we're not gonna do that anymore?
What do you, no.
Hey, Commissioner,
Yes?
that's two things in the same line. That's actually the full-time police officer pay plus that senior officer premium pay. If you were to factor out what the senior officer thing is, it's probably a couple of $1,000s. For whatever reason, they're included in the same line.
Okay,
together.
it's just not, I don't disbelieve you, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. At home, I'm thinking, okay, I'm good, thank you.
Any questions or move on?
Well, now that you mention it, we haven't gotten down to 146 yet, have we?
No,
Okay, I'll save my
we're
question.
still at 132.
Okay.
so understanding this correctly, last year, the 19 budget included the 15 full-time, including the senior officer.
Right, because it was 14, we hired 2 halfway through the
Halfway
year.
through,
Those 2 make a
made
whole,
the 15, I got it.
right?
And then in 2020,
We would add another half,
it makes it the other two halves.
just one half.
Just one half, that would be a July
Right,
hire.
July 1 or after.
Leon, I missed the comma there between
And
full-time
that
and
would
senior.
be,
Thank you.
so then in
That's
2021, let's just assume all things stay exactly the same they were in 16. No additional came on, I know that wasn't the plan. We would then have one additional, we would have double the addition we're putting in this year for 2021, and then whatever potential
Right.
add-on for the following year, which we were requested in 2021,
21.
you would probably go with the half year.
Another half.
So we wouldn't be actually seeing all the full-time officers coming close to steam.
Well,
It would not be until 2022. Right.
Some time ago, I handed out a spreadsheet to the board that showed the long-term effect of all 4 officers. And that was after the final one that was hired reached his or her 5th year. And that was somewhere down the road quite a bit, maybe 2029. But it showed the full financial brunt of those hires to be about $705,000, I believe.
With the four.
With all 4 in, once they've all reached their 5th step. Yeah.
And then, if I'm understanding correctly from the ad hoc and what the original request was back in 18, that once we gotten to that point, that would satisfy the police department's kind of need to get to the service level that you're hoping to get to, down the road. So I heard the word plateau, which seemed like a silver lining to me in all of this, these
Yeah.
discussions over the last 6 months. And, so if we're gonna hit a plateau, and I'm just something that maybe take a deep look at. 'Cause, you know, we're looking at a lot of money here moving down the road, and I just wanna make sure that we're making the prudent decisions to do that. I mean, I'm inclined to just, to go along with what was originally, put forward, because I believe in the ad hoc study, I believe in the statistics. I just wanna kind of feel like I'm, for myself at least, that we're making the absolute right decision moving forward, especially if we're gonna reach a plateau, so to speak.
Well, Rich, I think you recall that what we said too is, and that was part of the ad hoc, is we will annually come back to the board, and redo those numbers, because, you know, both could happen. The bottom could drop out backwards, or the bottom could drop out forward. So we would have to take a look and see, you know, what's gonna happen, downrange. But I think for EMS, for all personnel, we need to take a look at every single year, to see what the impact is. Because, you know, we understand, the issue is those numbers go up, if there's equipment issues or other things, that puts pressure on those things as well. So, that's why we try to go through and kind of weed and seed where we could in this budget, knowing that there was additional personnel impacts. And we made the commitment to do that every single year. Probably prior to this point, it might be like a summer thing where we take a look at not the annual January through December, because then it's too late. But we come back and give you a really good read midsummer on where we are for the previous 12 months up to that point. And then that can feed into, that data can feed into decisions to where we go with the personnel perspective.
Right. And I'm just saying, you know, although there's not a big EMS demand this year, it looks like we're gonna have some more EMS demand in the future now that the ad hoc study kind
Right.
of put forward. And then of course I'm foreseeing a lot of expenses coming on the fire side to the end of the future too. That could be out even farther than 4 or 5 years. So I just wanna make sure that we put everything in perspective now that we kind of have the bigger picture with the ad hoc study.
Right.
And from a number standpoint, I do like hearing that we are, you know, that it looks like things might calm down from the plateau, so to speak, down the road, and getting there. I'm not sure at this point what the pace we want to get.
Director, I've come to appreciate, as a long-term board member, I've come to appreciate Vice President Malone in his concern for down the road. You know, I am down the road for me, and we'll be making decisions here for other boards. And I guess I have a plateau question. Does anyone, what happens when we, you know, to me, a plateau is something you rest on, and you're there, and you're really enjoying being there. Do we see anything moving back? What happens when that plateau happens? Because once an employee is put on the books, they never go away.
We call it the ratchet effect.
The what?
The ratchet effect.
Ratchet.
Yeah.
The kids have that saying. I'm not quite sure we mean the same thing.
No, it's essentially, it's once it locks in, you don't go backwards.
Okay,
It's the
yeah,
ratchet,
yeah,
you know.
got it now.
So it's a mechanical term. for
Yeah, I got it
ratchet.
now. I don't want to
but-
tell you what the kids mean. Go ahead.
No,
I know.
I don't know if I want to know.
No, you don't.
But no, you know, there's a point at which, if there's a downswing, there's ways to do that other than just letting employees go. You can do it through attrition. There's other ways to map that. The problem is, I don't know if any of us here can actually look in some kind of crystal ball and say, this is where we're going to be 3 years from now, 4 or 5 years from now. We can look at the trends statistically to see where we've been and where the trend analysis is. And I think that's appropriate to do every single year, to give that data to the board, so that this board, boards of the future, can look at that history and see where it goes. It will depend on a lot of things, not just residential development, but it will also depend upon commercial development as well. If commercial development goes well, call volume may go up as a result of that. It depends what will come into the township from a commercial perspective.
Well, we're getting developed out.
And once that happens, yeah, there may be more of a plateau.
anecdotally speaking, I don't see there being a decline in need for these services in the near future. And the presentation was to maintain the work rate for per officer sort of basis. So the presentation that was given to you with the 4 officer hiring plan was to maintain really the level of service that we have. We're not really doing any increase in level of service, but it's to keep the status quo scaled up for anticipated future development, future needs. The revisitation that would happen in 2022, you're right. I think we're going to be built down at that point. I wouldn't anticipate even more hires or another wave of 4 or what have you. But the future holds what the future holds. But as you say, plateau there is really not a place that we get comfortable at. It's a place where we pause, we reevaluate, and we see where things go from there. Society doesn't seem to be going in a direction where we have less of it.
There's other, as we've talked even during the ad hoc, there's technology adds too. And one of the things I'll get to later on is the, us putting in those license plate reader technology has been a game changer for us. Because if we wouldn't have that, we may be coming back asking for additional personnel because the crime is going up and we need to track that down and we don't have enough people to run down the leads for those things. But that has been like amazing. It happens all the time. Every report, almost every single day, has an incident happening where they go check the database and identify a vehicle that went through the LPR. And now they have a license plate to follow up on. And then they go check JNet and the PennDOT system and they go, yeah, the picture from the mall matches the picture of the driver that owns this car. So it becomes this basically computer investigation through the databases that ends up saying, yeah, I'm gonna call them up, see if they'll come in. If they don't come in, I'm just gonna charge them. And then we'll get a warrant for them. So the process of doing that with the value add of technology is amazing. You know, in my early days of law enforcement, I never would have foreseen, it was like Dick Tracy time, you know? I never would have foreseen we ever be in here. But it's an everyday event that's happening for us. And that takes what you spend on technology is far less many times than what you spend on personnel. Because it's not salary, it's not benefits, but it's value add through that technology. So there may be, who knows what that future will hold in terms of, you know, facial recognition and all kinds of other things that may be downrange that would actually help make those employees more productive.
Well, this is a very simple comparison. And I'm telling you that up front. That when we talk about technology, how many of us expected to go in and check out our own groceries, right?
And that's
so there are 6 grocery stations with 1 person watching. If there's a problem, they go up and get. Now, I'm not saying in law enforcement settings, but it's the technology.
Right.
And I think it's very important for us to stay on the cutting edge
Yeah.
of what's available.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good discussion. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, moving on. 133 is the salary for CSOs. We have no additional increases for hours that are requested there. The board's been very generous moving us up to where we are currently, and we think that we can live with that. The crossing guards, again, no additional increase or hours requested. Evidence tech, 135. We found when we took a look at the budget that OT was being charged to Dave's primary salary line. So it was basically causing it to be kind of inflated and it was harder to track. So we took a look and we saw that he's probably in the $12,000 a year range for his overtime. So another line was actually moved to 148. So you'll see an increase in 148 for overtime, but that's because of moving Dave's there out of his salary line to that point. 190 personnel services, again, no additional increases.
Dave, the overtime, I think Leon, I missed commas again. 410, 146 overtime, is that for lieutenant, corporate, and sergeant? Is that what that's supposed to?
Yes, that's just the commands, corporals, lieutenants, and sergeants. So So they, whatever overtime they accumulate comes out of that line. All the rest of the officers, it comes out of the patrol officer overtime. There is no overtime again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then I was at 191, uniform purchase. The significant, I'm not going to go down each one of them, but the significant additional items with increases or decreases. Uniform pants decreased from 10,000 to 8,500. Uniform shirts increased from 3,900 to 9,024. It's largely because they're going to a different uniform model and exterior bulletproof vests instead of the interiors that we've seen before. Speaking of bulletproof vests, the ballistic vests, we're continuing to cycle their replacements. They have 5-year warranties with required replacement, so we are up to the point where we have to replace 9 of them in 2020. Now, some of that comes back through the ballistic vest reimbursement program through the feds, but it's always a year later that we get that reimbursement. It's never the year that the expenditure is made.
How often do you replace the vest?
Every 5 years.
5 years?
Right. Helmets, again, the Kevlar helmets or the bulletproof helmets, they've been limited useful life and they're replaced in cycles just as the vests are. So we're looking at replacing 10 of them. They're about $600 a piece. So again, it's every 5 years. $6,000 would be that expenditure at 600 bucks a piece. Gas masks, 10 replacements, also on the same cycle as ballistic vests. So and we try to match the helmet and the officer's helmet and gas mask at the same time.
Does each officer get a helmet?
Yes. Yeah, they're basically fit to the officer. So that's $5,000.
Good news is next year, there's only 3 replacements of each of those. So
I'm just curious, what goes wrong with the helmet? Or over time, what deteriorates?
Well,
I mean, we're not using those that often, are we?
Now, but it's essentially that whatever the manufacturer determines what their warranty period is. So they warrant them at 5 years. Now, you could, if you're a cynic, you could argue that they do that to sell more helmets, but actually, the old helmets, it used to be, the interior liner used to like chip and fade, and it would get like, you wouldn't want to wear it after 5 years.
Right.
that's Kevlar manufacturers, like people make the bulk Kevlar, on the warranty of the material itself for that length of time. Because over time, they're made of fibers, and they slowly pull apart,
That's
expand,
it. So
which makes their ballistic property less
Yep.
reliable.
We have the same problem with what's here? The Kevlar, isn't there Kevlar?
Yeah, probably.
So we'll have to,
Theoretically, if it's, however long it was.
It could be,
oh, that's just the board. Don't worry about it.
I don't know what the difference
You were
between.
here when I showed, when I talked to bring that in for the easier left before I showed, the last time the piece of Kevlar that we had left over that our maintenance supervisor took home and shot with various ammunition to see what would happen. Yeah, you'd be happy.
The static application may be a little different than something that's, rolling around in the car.
Right.
If that makes you feel better.
Not
hopefully.
somewhat, no.
Still, somebody's going to do it, still got
You gotta get,
Yeah, that was my plan.
you gotta get down behind and under.
That was my plan. I mean, I got a lot of practice when I was a kid for nuclear war. We used to just get under
Oh,
our desk
yeah.
and face away from the window.
You had to get under the desk.
Under the desk and
remember
face
that.
away from the window.
Yep.
You don't remember
It was the old civil defense days.
that. That's it. What,
Pre-FEMA.
what is the percentage, what is the police budget? I guess this is a Rick question, the police budget percentage of the total. Do you know offhand? Ballpark?
Oh, you mean the percentage increase for police?
No, what's the,
percentage of the overall budget is
Oh.
on the operating side, I calculated about 70, so About the 800. No, I'm sorry, I did that based on just the increase. So I don't know the full budget.
That's all right, Rick. I was just looking for a ball, I thought maybe I could get a ballpark.
Yeah, it's about 3/7. They're trying to,
3/7.
trying to get you
I gotta
closer,
go
but
do the math. What is it? 3/7. Why would you pick sevenths? I want police. Okay, I'll write that down. 3/7. Thanks, I think. Okay, thanks. 43%?
Well, no, I'm just taking a stab.
I'm glad that there's no knives around here. Okay. Thank you.
Moving on.
Yeah.
231 gasoline, that line was decreased by $5,000 based upon actual use and anticipated impact. You'll notice when we get to capital that the two proposed Ford Explorers SUVs, we're anticipating buying hybrid. And when everybody hears that, they go like, a hybrid for a police car. But I will tell you that we were down at the Maryland Proving Grounds. Charlie went along down and Greg went along down, and they are faster off the line than the gas models because they have a higher torque and they're a hybrid. So they run on the battery systems. They run all of the lights while they're sitting idle, essentially, and the engine will come on to charge the battery, and that's it. So
What line are you in, Dave?
we think we're going to have. I'm on the gasoline. We think we're going to continue to have a savings with those two vehicles.
Got it, thank you.
So that's why we feel comfortable decreasing that line item for gas, $5,000.
Fantastic.
The what? They charge automatically. The gas engine charges the batteries. So they're not it's not a plug-in. It's not a gas. It's not an electric vehicle per se. It's a hybrid.
Dave, on 410-220, you're showing fire and police donations.
Right.
What are we donating to?
That is, if we use a search and rescue dog, like Summit Search and Rescue, we would make a small donation to them. If we use someone else's fire police, extended duration, someone who's not always somehow
Yeah.
funding or have mutual aid agreement.
Yeah, you have
That's
fire police dog and SAR dog donation.
Search and rescue. yeah.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
It's just it's not an every year expenditure, but it's there
Sure.
as a placeholder.
Mm-hmm.
Back on 410-192, uniform maintenance decreased $2,000, again based upon the 2019 actual use.
Thank you very much.
210 and 212, office supplies and forms are the same without any increase. Under 220, general expenditures, we added $300 for meeting expenses. These were things that we ended up using and basically pulled out of the line, even though there was not a place for them. $500 for Easy Pass transports, and that's not to transport people to the prison. We don't take the turnpike to do that. That's for prisoner transports if we have to go to Philadelphia to bring somebody back, or other business that we use the turnpike. We went a year or so ago and got Easy Passes for all of the vehicles. So, because otherwise we were reimbursing officers out of their pocket. So, we require them if they go on the turnpike just to notify us, and then Diana goes online and sees which Easy Pass was used and what the trip was, and we have a receipt essentially.
Makes sense.
It's actually cheaper to use Easy Pass than cash.
It is.
Yeah,
I
now,
know,
right,
I
you're
know.
right, you're right. Yeah, they raised
Yep.
the prices.
And then the only other thing that's there is $50 for the mass shredding expense, which is a township-wide mass shredding project. That's our payment towards that. Under 242, ammunition and targets, the line was decreased by $480. Under 245 operating expenses, there's a decrease to the line of minus 3.3%, overall $500. But some of the, so when you see some of these ads, they did not cause the line to go over, they're still under the line. But flash memory was added for 500 because we're doing a lot of evidence transfers with flash memory. If you go out to a store who has a video of somebody, you just download that evidence from that camera system and bring it back and put it in our evidentiary files. Tasers, every year we're in the place of replacing older models, older units. The line here was originally 5,400 for 5. We reduced that for just 3 for 3,240. Gun parts for the AR-15s was 2,000. We reduced that to 500. Minor equipment is 260. The portrait lens, 625 was removed. We'll push that to 2021. The micro lens we had in originally at 390 was removed, and we'll push that to 2021. Watch guard and vehicle mobile camera systems, we adjusted to 12,300 for 2 units instead of 3. The cell phone analyzer, $1,000, was removed and pushed to 2021. The tombstone shields, 400, removed and pushed to 2021. The 4 kick shields, 560, removed and pushed to 2021. And the metal detector, $900, was again removed and pushed to 2021. The forensic unit accessories for inside the vehicle was 2,000. We reduced that to 1,000. And this ad request that you see for 2,700 is another one of those cameras we talked about earlier that goes with the system that Aaron and Scott have been working on. It's the dual lens 1536 line resolution rear parking lot camera on the PD side. That's why it's listed here under the police. Under 261, vehicles, minor equipment, it's the same, no increases. Under Service Bureau 312, Crime Watch analytics. Recall we used to have the crime dashboard, which was our crime mapping program. When we switched to Crime Watch, when they provided a product that we're using now currently very successfully, and they had a product with it now called Labs that hopefully will be implemented here shortly. So that was, it actually caused a reduction of $700 when we switched those programs, and I think we got a better bang for the buck. Hexagon CAD interface, it will be $3,000. Everybody, I think, is aware that the county is switching to a new CAD, the Hexagon CAD system. And this will interface Cody RMS with that county CAD system. So when they complete a CAD entry and push it, it'll go right into our records management system. So there's not duplicate entry associated with it. There's a time savings piece to that as well as an accuracy piece. Cody is not charging us for the interface side of that. They're doing that at their cost. So I think the only charge is to Hexagon, which is the CAD vendor. Sure.
The cell phone analyzer is a device that we can plug into cell phones that we seize that will basically replicate that cell phone onto a thumb drive so that we can have the data there for further analysis later on. We get it before somebody remotely deletes their phone, or we have to put the phone back to them or something like that. So this will save a lot of time. Right now, we send things to the Attorney General's office or the state police. It takes 6, 8, 12, 16, 24 months to get our results.
So you have the information. Well, first of all, I know that that's pushed to 2021, right?
It is, and we've gone through many of these things. We're in the budget this year.
Yeah.
In the initial proposed budget, we've been asked to cut some things out. It's still something that's a valuable tool that we had to take our balance.
Right. So if the AG's office has the phone, then you you can use the information to do stuff here that we need to do.
Or there's that as well. In some cases, it may eliminate the need to send it to the agent's office.
Oh.
Have to sit there for, 6 months to a year, while we're waiting for the list of priorities and that state.
Yeah, their backlog is tremendous because they're getting things from everybody, where it's a lot more beneficial and more efficient if we can just do those kind of things in-house.
It helps us to triage too. If there's something that we get from that cell phone analyzer that kind of points us in a direction, then we sort of know what path to send the whole thing to the AD's office. They know where they would want to take forward. No. Those are for our defensive tactics training, basically the things that we hit pretty much. They've taken a lot of wear and tear over the years. It's been a long time since we've replaced them. Some of them are splitting at the seams, but they'll make it another year.
Is it true,
Yep, same thing.
is it true you have one for each member of the board that you practice?
Well,
You can borrow them if
What?
you like.
No, they have our
Like-
names
like
on,
our
yeah.
picture, yeah.
the likenesses are purely coincidental.
That's right.
Let's see how this budget goes.
Okay, moving on to 261, vehicles, minor equipment, that's the same, no increases. Well, we did this one, Crime Watch Analytics and Hexagon. Other professional, 318. Investigative expenses, cell tower data dumps reduced to 500 from 2,000 originally. What that is, I can explain, is when you do a search warrant on a cellular company, they are now charging to provide you the data on the search warrant. So if you're looking for, I'm going to AT&T or Verizon and saying, did this number in this investigation hit any of your cell towers in the area of this crime or leading up to it? They'll say, sure, we'll give you that. They can charge you up to $500 basically.
Is that
to
a
get
tower
data.
dump?
It's a tower dump,
Okay.
right.
Wondered what a tower dump was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so basically we're saying we reduced that from 2,000 down to 500. There was a point in which we had nothing in the budget for that, so we were taking it out of other areas. The ad request is 5,453. I talked about this earlier, the license plate reader LPR. We got that basically, we bought the server for that. This was essentially, this is the maintenance agreement for the license plate reader and the server. As I said, this is a game changer technology. And the arrangement was that other departments around us could also utilize that server, and then we would charge a small fee to support that. We have one department right now that plans to sign on to that project, and we'll share that cost through an MOU. There's probably two others, I think, that are probably looking at it as well, but I don't know where that'll end up going at that point, so.
Fairly confident in the one. I don't know.
Yeah, I know of one other. I talked to their chief, and he's looking at putting two separate readers in a neighboring jurisdiction. So it'll give us access to all of that data, even on their readers, and it will come to our server. So I think it's essential for us to maintain the license for the maintenance on that. So that's why it's put in as an ask.
Do we have other PDs using our
Yeah,
simulator?
we do. We actually invoice them $500 a year for that service.
And then they just check it out?
Yeah,
If we're not
well,
using-
we train them, they're trained the trainers, and they don't check it out, they actually come back to our
come in.
facility. So they're back in the outbuilding, essentially doing that training on a routine basis. So they
Great.
can come in any time of the day and night. We just, officer comes in, turns the alarm off, and they have access.
That's great.
So it's been a really successful program using
Sure.
that model. So in January of every year, we invoice them $500. And I think we have 5 different departments that are now
Oh, that's great.
doing that with us.
And just to clarify, the add-on, ad request for the $5,453 that you're parking. the license plate reading maintenance, that's the recurring,
Yes,
possibly with the natural increases over.
right. It's a maintenance
the
agreement.
Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah,
That's per annual.
that's annual, right. The 321 is a communication expense. That's the same with no increases. Again, 321's, I think I copied that twice, same, no increases. Maintenance and repair of office equipment, same, no increases, that's 370. 375, maintenance and repair of vehicles, watch car, guard car, and interview room, video maintenance increase of $100 to cover the interview room. We added a system in the interview room for interviewing people that are detained. It's the same system, basically, just a little bit of reconfiguration. That was installed in 2019, so there'll be about a $100 increase for that maintenance agreement. Radio maintenance is the same with no increases. 421 is training. The overall decrease in the line from 45,200 to about 44,630 for 2020. That includes, again, tuition assistance. It's decreased due to less requests for tuition. We anticipate 4 officers seeking reimbursement at about $3,000 apiece. Although the training lines remain relatively stable, the new training requested includes $3,500 for 3 officers to the CALIA conference this year. We do that every other year. $3,600 for Krav Maga. How do you pronounce it? Krav Maga. I always get that wrong.
Make America great again.
Instructor recertification, that's required every 2 years. And $700 for less lethal instructor certification, that's required every 2 years. And then Dave Ickler has to maintain his IAI certification, his Homicide Investigator Association. So that dollar amount is in there for that as well.
Dave, lethal instructor, cert. Same people, same 2 people, or who goes to that?
Less lethal instructor certification. That is the feedback done.
Oh, what did I say? Okay.
That's the instructor.
Okay. So then we're teaching the
train the
teacher.
trainer
Train the
instructor.
trainer here, yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. But we save a lot of money not having to send people out.
Yes.
Correct.
It's all done in-house. Once we have the instructors trained, but they have to be recertified
Yes,
for any new.
things change.
Right, exactly. All right, under 460, animal control added $500 due to increase for nobody's cats fee. I think it's $17.50 for each of them. I remember. Yeah, but it brought a $500 increase to the line. Lab services, 462 is the same with no increases. And then the final piece here is capital. Patrol car replacements, we're looking at 2. As I mentioned earlier, Ford Explorer is fully equipped, so this brings it in with all of the accoutrements that go with it, the cages and everything else, the consoles. And they're hybrids. We're looking at ordering hybrids. The CSO vehicle replacement, this is the second one. You saw the one we brought out front. We're going to duplicate that vehicle for $46,500. There's a records copier in capital for $10,000, and then a forensic drying cabinet for $4,000 or $10,400, which is beneficial, so you're not hanging bloody clothes, out in the lab, with exposing blood products to the lab and to Dave. So it's a drying cabinet for those kind of pieces. And I think that takes us to the end. Any other questions?
7.6% overall increase. Good. I think that's reasonable.
Well, that's without any of the ads.
Oh, without the add-ons, okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna erase my good then. I was gonna give you a good with a smiley face, but can't do that.
I have a couple of quick questions. Just in general, what's our overall policy? I'm not sure how, to be honest with you, how municipal government is regulated with regard to, like, when we budget in the, you know you have to play in certain things or whatever. You may or may not as it comes, if the budget starts to work itself out throughout the year. Do we have a policy that if we want to transfer, like, funds to use it for something else in the operating side, is there a policy for that?
Within the budget?
Yeah.
Or within the department?
Yeah.
They're allowed to go over budget on line items. We look closely at the budget for the department as a whole, when we look at the big picture anyway. So it's kind of tedious to transfer around, because these are obviously just estimates, and sometimes you go over and sometimes you go under.
Okay, so when we go under, you have the ability to throw some things in if it looks like the other things are gonna go over.
It's very unusual for a department to go over budget. I mean, it happens. Usually there's a very well-known reason why that would be. So it isn't really something that we have to look at often, as far as I mean, we do. I mean, I'm not suggesting we don't look at it, but departments going over budget, like I said, is very unusual.
We do have a policy, whereas if you want to purchase something that is not in the budget, you look for something else you want to give up. So, yeah, we kind of do it that way. And then if we have to, we will transfer budget between line items for something significant, if it's over $5,000, let's say.
Rick, for one of the banks I worked at, we department heads, we would get a monthly, monthly variance report on where the budget was, what we had budgeted, and how we were doing it. We had to, over a certain threshold, we had to have a reason, and get it into the controller. Is there anything like that here, or do you budget that well?
It happens so unusually. We do look at the budget, well, I look at it constantly, and if there is pressure in any budget, Tom and I will sit down with that department, which we don't have to do very often, but it is monitored.
I will tell you that we monthly go to the budgets, and we'll sit around my table with a screen on it. We'll flash them up, and captains will tell you. And we take a look at each line, and we take a look at where are we and what percentage of the year. So you get halfway through the year, are we over 50% in that line, or are we not? And we will analyze that in terms of what we have already spent and what was budgeted in the line items for what we should be buying. So we monitor that very, very closely.
Smart board would help with that.
That'll be tremendous.
Yeah. You'd think. So that leads me to my final, I think will be my final question, and that is, thank you for eyeballing these things and pulling them out. It seems like a prudent thing to do. It seems like there were a lot of things tonight, particularly in the police budget, that are decreasing. So obviously, we're
Thank
seeing
you.
them, we're taking them out, so we don't just have these surpluses and then it just goes, let's say the fund balance or whatever at the end of the year. And so where do you think, and I know we mixed capital and operating into what we saw tonight, but I mean, I know it made it difficult. Where do you see the budget, the police budget particularly coming in? That seems to be our big number for this year, for 2019.
Well, I didn't look at that portion, I looked at where we are in terms of what we pulled out, but I didn't like add in the add-ins again to look at it. So Rick may have scrutinized that more than I
Yeah,
did.
there'll be well, I mean, there's always something that could happen, but the way it looks, they'll be a little bit under budget coming in. They typically are.
2019.
Yeah.
2019 will be.
That's the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
We clearly,
We gotta come in
In
with
fact-
both the capital and the operating sides.
Well, in total, I mean, I didn't actually, in my memory, remember what they did with capital
Is it
versus
just a
operating.
small number, do you think, or is it gonna be something?
Like I said, capital is pretty much,
Not gonna-
maybe 5% under capital.
Okay.
I think we've already spent everything we're going to spend there. As far as the rest of the budget goes, we're really close to on target. I mean, it's not going to be a huge
Okay.
number,
Thank you.
Thank all your department heads out there.
Yeah, they've been at this for a few months diligently.
Well, don't you start as soon as we approve the budget, don't you start on the next year's budget?
No, absolutely.
Well,
There was
some of the
a-
things were already started, because the things that we told you were gonna be
I'm
like,
sorry.
moved to 2021, you know, we'll be looking at 2021.
We got a big jump on 2021.
Yeah.
You thought nobody was listening, right, Leon?
What's going on in 2021, Leon?
We already have half the budget written.
I'm waiting. I want to be around for the plateau.
Looking at the agenda and the clock,
Yeah.
is anybody interested in doing other funds, or would we like to defer that to another time? They don't take very long, so we could do it as actually even part of a regular meeting,
That's
if you wanted.
That's what I would like you to do.
Yeah, everybody's got budget fatigue right now. Are there any questions about the additional handouts that came out in your packet? One of them had a cover memo from me that
Yeah.
showed the operating
Yeah.
increases. Another one was from Rick that indicated the
Yeah.
increases year to year and the potential tax increases to pay for those.
I actually did, but we don't have to do that tonight either, I
Nope,
suppose.
don't have to.
Well, I mean, I'll be ready with my questions whenever you're ready to do it.
Yes, I'll get that. That'll be easy, because we'll just pull out.
I figured that wouldn't be difficult.
Yeah, we'll just pull out what the bills that we paid to them. A little extra information on, because I think we paid them quarterly, the Life Team? Monthly? Well, they showed on the monthly bill how much it was over, so.
Maybe we said that we want to value it, one of the
Tom, I'm
sure we're not
curious.
in your packet.
Tom, I'm curious. You referenced a spreadsheet that you had sent out prior. I happen to bring along a memo from you, increases to operating budgets. Is that what you were talking about, David, back in October?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And that's been,
Yeah.
also been updated.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, October 2nd. You're right. I'm already, you're right.
You guys are still on the air.
Anybody in the audience have anything else to add this evening? Anybody around the podium? So if there is nothing else, I'm going to adjourn this session. Adjourn this session.